Today on the Social Corner.
And all the people that I've worked with who saw me were also very fearless and demanded me to be fearless as well, because they were like, you got something to say. I'm celebrating the people who are shattering those narratives and shattering the spaces where problematic narratives exist.
Hello and welcome to this very special episode of the Social Corner with me, Daina Anderson-Mpunzi. So today is a little different as it's our first international interview, or link up if you will, but it is no less exciting because my guest today is just, well, basically awesome. My guest today is an award-winning journalist, podcasting executive and editorial consultant, passionate about using her platform to bridge the gap between underrepresented audio creators and the podcast industry. She's currently the lead of Spotify's Sound Up Behind the Mic Fellowship for Black Early Career Podcasters and host of the brilliant podcast, The Cipher. And today she joins me all the way from the States via video link in the studio. Christabel Nsiah-Buadi. How are you? Thank you for joining me. Welcome to the Social Corner.
Thank you. You said all the way video link up. Thank you very much for having me. I'm super excited. Very excited.
This is our first kind of video. Well, we've never done this before, so I'm hoping that it all comes out well.
It's going to be amazing.
It's going to be amazing. But your home, where are you at the moment? So for the viewers, where are you?
Okay, well, if I'm going to get I'm going to get really specific. I am in a studio where we typically record the podcast, The Cipher, in Los Angeles, California. I'm 8 hours behind you.
8 hours behind, but LA seems so much further ahead.
We could have a conversation about that.
So home is LA, is that right for you at the moment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Home is LA. That's where I live.
That's where you live, but it hasn't always been that way because were you born in the UK?
Very much so. I was born in Scotland.
Oh,
My
wow.
people. Scotland, yes. Glasgow to be exact. I'm Scottish. That's the best Scottish accent I can do, by the way.
So born in Scotland, and did you grow up there?
First 3 years of my life were in Glasgow. And I was the only one in my immediate family who was born outside of Ghana. My sister, I have a big sister, she was born in Ghana. My parents came over after she was born. And so I was the one who was born in Glasgow in Scotland. And then we moved to London when I was about three or 4 years old. We moved all the way down to London to join my dad's, community of close friends and cousins and stuff like that.
What are your memories of that time? Can you cast your mind that far back to moving to London?
Yes. I think I do. I was just talking to my mum about this because I was like, I moved down when I was 4 or 5. She was like, you were 3. So one of my earliest memories of London is living in my uncle's house. I remember starting school. That's one of my earliest memories, starting school in London, and my dad giving me the talk, right, about what I needed to do in this space as an African girl with an African name, and how people were going to treat me. And he was very, very weary. That's actually one of my first memories. And I remember processing all of that. And I'm an artist. I draw. That's one of my skills. And kind of like drawing this quadrant, this square, and being like, all right, so if white boys are there and girls are on this side, then I'm on this bottom quadrant. So that's what I have to do.
So so there's boys, girls, and you. Is that what you're saying?
Boys at the top, yeah. White people at the top. So white boys would be here. Yeah, as I think of the logic, it doesn't quite make sense. But ultimately, what I understood was that white boys, men, were at the top of the heap, or perceived to be so. The conversation was not that I was less than. The conversation was, you are beyond capable and you're amazing. other people have got it wrong. This is how society is going to see you.
Okay.
And so white boys would be at the top, so to speak, which meant white girls would be here. Yeah. Black boys would be there. But that side was also where they got all the opportunities, which meant that I would get the least opportunities.
Wow.
Does that make sense? Yeah, I know. Right. And I would have been, I just turned 5, maybe.
That's a lot
And
to process at such a very young age. How do you recall what your feelings were like when you kind of took that information in and said, okay, this is my place in the world right now?
A little bit of confusion, but not quite understanding it, because my place in the world was one of certainly inside the house. It was full of love, and like I'm going to use this phrase, and I will use it for the title of the book that I may or may not one day write. I will write it. Like, I lived with giants. Do you know what I mean? Like, I lived with really smart people. I lived with, like, it was vibrant. All of my life was vibrant at that time. And then what I was being told by one of those giants was that you're gonna have to work to keep that vibrancy that you have in your life. Not on the outside, like you're always gonna be that person, but people aren't gonna get what we get. But I had a sense of defiance, because really my dad was telling me in the sense of, you get yours, get your thing. Don't worry about it. You're just gonna have to do this extra work. You know what I mean? So there was a slight sense of defiance, but I think that came more from my dad, which is his goal. He wanted to fortify me rather than scare me. But he was talking to a girl who was already feeling othered because I had a different accent to everybody else in the house. It's not like I didn't even have a Ghanaian accent. You know what I mean? Which all of my parents and uncles and aunties had. I also didn't have a London accent. So I got bullied for that. I got bullied for sounding different. So I already knew and understood what it meant to be othered and to be different and not to be the same. And so it was quite it was a scary place, actually, when I really, really stopped to think about it. I was scared, but I was defiant. Two very different feelings, I think. But all of that came into it was determination is what came out of that. I was like, all right, well, I've got things to do.
It's like, to me, it almost sounds like two junctions meeting, and then the explosion is the determination, like you said. How did that determination manifest itself as you were growing up in London at that time?
Yeah, it didn't happen straight away. I would say that like my teachers would say to my parents, she knows the answers, but she's too scared to speak. So I think, which I think is quite funny because I speak for a living, but, or also actually it probably makes sense because I found my voice and I have things to say. So, it manifested in, being scared a lot and not speaking, but using my brains to make my point by writing it down eventually. My family in particular, like, they didn't raise no punks, if you know what I mean, right? So they were very much like, you got to keep trying. It's not that you can't do it. You can do it. My older sister, who, as I mentioned, she was born in Ghana. We met when I was younger. When I went to Ghana, I went for a few months when I was 3 before we moved to London. But my sister came over when I was about 5 or 6. And there's 3 years between us. She's older than me. And she had this confidence about her, right? She's a big personality and very defiant. And we've talked about it before. And that came from being raised in a country and in a home where you weren't questioned all the time. You know what I mean? Like, and also, like, she grew up in a home where she got whatever she wanted, right? Because she was one of the, I don't think she was the favorite. I think she may have been the only one at the time, or certainly one of the younger ones, right? So she came from quite a privileged experience in the first 8 years of her life, but also she grew up in a country where everybody kind of sort of looked like her, if you know what I mean. It's certainly in terms of skin color, right? There were white people there, obviously, but the country's leaders looked a particular way, right? The people who were in her lives who had authority looked a particular way. And so when she came to the UK, she was not defiant, but she was very confident. And I remember us walking to a dance class one time, and these kids were like throwing rocks at us and calling us all kinds of names. You know, the names that they like to call black kids back in the day, and probably still do. And they're like, you know, why don't you go back to your effing country and all of that, right? And my sister turned around and she thought about, and she would have fought them. I think she may have fought them one time. So they're always coming for us. And I was like, please don't. I just want to make it unscathed, right? And she turned around and she said, when your people get out of my country, then we'll go back. She was about 8 or 9 years old.
Wow.
And I remember looking at her and being like, what? What do you mean? What? And she was just like, don't mind them. And then we went. And when I tell you that shut it down, actually, like, I don't remember being harassed by them afterwards. They gave us dirty looks, but my sister would be like, shut it down.
What did it do for you when you saw that?
Oh, it energized me. It immediately grounded me, because I was like, oh yeah, when you get out of my country, because I have a country, number one, right? When you get out of my country, then I'll get out of yours. Because what it told me was not that you need to get out of my country and all of that. What it told me was I had a place and a space, yeah, and that I was just as equal as you. And so you don't get to throw stuff at me. You don't get to treat me like I'm nothing, because I am something. And here's the joke. You don't even know I am. I know more than you. So it immediately placed me, it grounded me, I think.
Wow. And you were 8 then. How old were you then? 5, 6, 7?
I would have been maybe 7. We were both under 10, or certainly around, she was certainly around 10 and I was still under 10. It was a game changer for me.
So you were kind of shy to speak prior to that and things like, did you shed that kind of shyness, that fear?
I think I went to 3 I know I went to 3 primary schools, and the second primary school I went to, they moved me a grade up because they were like, okay, well, she's a bit sharp and this other class is full. Do you want to go up? And so I struggled through that year. And at the end of it, they said, do you want to stay in this year or do you want to go back down? I said I wanted to go back down because all my friends were in the year below, and it was too much for me socially. No one wanted to talk to me. I felt super inhibited. So I was like, let me go back to the year that I know where there are people that I can relate to. That was in the second primary school, right? The third primary school was the Catholic primary school. And I was the only black kid in that class. The schools before then, everybody was there, right? It was a school in an estate, because I lived in an estate. So everybody was there. So I went from that and kind of starting to find my voice, you know, because like on the estate, people are going to say stuff to you. And I started to fight back because of what my sister did. I remember these boys, I don't know if you're going to bleep this out, but I'll say it anyway. Remember these twin boys calling Sandy and myself, right? And I remember this was after my sister said what she said, looking at Sandy, and she's Ghanaian as well. And we looked at them and we just laughed at them for 5 minutes. And I think I must have said to those kids, if you're going to call us a name, at least get the right one. You know, if you're going to do it right. And they were like, what? And we stood there and we roasted them for 5 minutes until they went back inside and started crying.
Wow.
And then when they started crying, we were like, exactly. If you're going to cuss me out, use the right term. If you don't, then you must leave.
Yeah. It's interesting hearing you recount those incidences, because I think what I'm hearing is in every situation there was a moment of character building that kind of helped you, I suppose, formulate and build that resolve that you needed to kind of go forward. But also there was also a lot of othering, it sounds like, as well. So when you've gone into the Catholic school and being the only black child, did you feel at that point that you needed to censor yourself in that environment? Were you aware of that?
Probably yes. I would say that, you know, before you're correct in that I was othered in all the ways. I was othered in my own house. At one point, it was because I had a different accent, and then it was because I didn't speak Twi as well as everybody else. Like, there are all the ways in which I understood I was not like everybody else, or I was told that I was not like everybody else, and sometimes it was used as a weapon. Oh, you don't understand. Oh, but I do. Oh, you English children. Oh, well, what does that mean? Do you know what I mean? So by the time I got to the Catholic school, you're adding the next layer of class. Now I'm this girl who lives in an estate. Certainly for the first few years of my life, I lived on an estate, and then my parents bought a house, right? Who lived on an estate, and I was poor compared to 50% of the kids who went there. When in reality, I mean, whether that mattered or not, it's just that they lived in houses, whether they were council houses or not, and they weren't on the big estate, but I was the one who did. And I remember a girl saying, she was talking about something, and we'd just come back from a trip, and she was just like, oh, I like those houses. And she drove past the estate that I lived on. She goes, oh, but poor people live there. Oh, sorry, Chris. And I was like, what? Okay. And she was a girl who was trying to be in with the richer girls, so to speak, the girls who lived in the nicer big houses, who got driven to school every day. I walked, she got driven in. So there was an understanding that the kids who had money were driven into school, and the kids that didn't would walk to school, which I didn't care about. That's the long way of saying, to answer your question, was I aware of being othered? Yes, 100% I was aware of being othered. And at that point, it was like water off a duck's back. I just knew that that's what it was. I understood that wherever I went, I was going to be different, wherever I went.
What did that young version of you know about your future at that moment in time?
I don't think she knew anything about her future. She just knew that she was ambitious, that she loved dancing, that she loved reading, and that it was gonna be okay. She was gonna make it, whatever that was. You know what I mean? Like, I grew up, like, I wanted to be a performer. And so this quietish girl, right? Quiet girl. My mum, even a few weeks ago, she said, you were always so quiet. And I was like, okay, lady. But even if there was a school play, I would get parts, because what I also was charismatic. So, like, I might not say anything, but when I did, it made people laugh, or it made people stop and think, right? And so when I went for auditions, I would get the parts. Like, I remember getting a part for the Queen of Hearts that we did in a primary school play. And I got on stage and I was super nervous, but I hammed it up, and everybody in the crowd was laughing. And the next year they were like, oh, Chris absolutely has to get the lead part next time. And I kind of liked that, because I was like, oh, okay, I have this power, this ability to make people stop and listen to me, which is important, because if you're not listened to, because the society that you live in has not just othered you, but rendered you invisible, right? Going back to that first, my first memory, all of a sudden being listened to just for being who you are was a release, as opposed to being listened to because you got the answer right.
So in the performance space, your identity, your true identity, could come through really without question.
Yeah, without me even noticing it. And so after that, I wanted, like, I'm going to age myself. Okay, who cares? You know what, whatever. So, like, Fame was on, and I was super young, and I loved Fame, and I knew I wanted to go to a theatre school or do drama. So my parents were like, yep, we're going to support that, do drama. So of course they find a drama school, but the drama they find is like the driest one, where I have to like recite poetry and do all of that. So like elocution lessons. I'm like, that's not what I wanted, but okay, fine. So but this dance school, I did modern dance, and there's a whole other story with that too, which I will now share, which is that I actually wanted to do ballet first. I did the audition with the lady, and she said it was, I did great, but she said that I couldn't do ballet because I was too big. I was not a big child, by the way. I was tall, right? And this woman said that, older white woman, and my dad was mad. He was mad. She was like, but you're really talented, so why don't you do modern? Right? Read the subtext as you choose. We all know what that means, right? So I did that. But I also did these drama classes where we would act and we would improvise, and we also had to read prose and poetry out loud. And it was RADA, so I had to do RADA levels. And it was that teacher actually who brought me out of myself. Because even like the way I'm speaking now, you had to round your vowels and all of that. And I was like, okay, fine. But she said, look, it's just a tool. And at various points, whether it was her or my dad or other people, they reminded me that what you're doing is you're bringing in tools that you can use. But my drama teacher in particular, who is this? She's, if you think of a drama teacher with like the flowy shirts and all of that, she was that person, but she was actually pretty gangster. And she was like, use this, apply this, right? Come out of yourself. Like, if you can imagine, I'm sure no one who's listening or watching can imagine this, but I would be talking like this. I'd be reading prose like that. And she was the one who said, look up, and I'd look up. And she said, enunciate, and I would enunciate. And she'd say, speak from your diaphragm, expand your diaphragm. And I would do that. And she was like, that's it.
Do you almost feel like she gave you permission?
Mm-hmm. She did. She absolutely gave me permission. But she absolutely gave me permission not to be different. She gave me permission to speak up. In fact, she didn't give me permission to speak up. She demanded that I speak up, actually.
Yeah. It makes such a difference, doesn't it? Just that one person that comes in and just that potent drop of encouragement or whatever it is can completely change the trajectory. And speaking of trajectories, you and I met last year.
Yes, we did.
We did, and we had a brief conversation at that meeting. And I remember listening to you and thinking, wow, you were telling me about the Cipher and what you do and everything. And I remember thinking, wow, and you had done the thing that I felt that I was too scared to do or hadn't done yet. You left the UK. You left and you took that leap. And I think I want to touch on that a little bit, because I think that was such an extraordinary vote of self-courage to do that. But leading up to that, because I don't imagine you just disappeared one day, but
I'm out.
I'm gone. Did the UK ever, did it feel like home to you at all growing up?
Yes, and it still does. It just feels like it feels like home as much as any place can. You understand what I'm saying? I feel like when I go to Ghana, that feels like home, even though I didn't go there. Like my pores open up and my whole spirit goes, okay, you're cool. You know what I mean? That feels like home. It feels like a different aspect of home. The UK feels like home too. When I'm touching down at Heathrow, my pores don't go, it doesn't do none of that.
Do they close?
Yeah, they close up because of the cold and all the other things. Yeah. But, if I go to London or I see my old friends, that's 100% home. The accent changes. I don't have to finish a sentence. I know where to get the food. The uncles and aunties are applying me with all the things. That feels like home. In a way that the US doesn't. The US feels like home, but it feels like, for most of the time, it feels like the place where I can breathe. I feel like sometimes I can be too big for the UK. I know that sounds arrogant. I don't mean it in that way, but what I mean by that is that I was raised by dreamers. I have dreams, and at every turn I was told, well, what do you want to do that for? Well, I don't know, you can do that. Well, how are you going to do that? I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I want to give it a try. You know what I mean? The US, not just because it's America and people go, yeah, of course we can do that. And I will say that's not the case everywhere you go in the US. There are people who share that smallness, so to speak. But in the US, I was given the space to breathe and to just try.
You could take up space from the sounds of it. Yeah.
I could take up space. And look, it's not like someone said to me, wow, why would you, America is such a dangerous place for Black people. Why would you go? And they were right. They were 100% right. But I can take up space there. I can try. And and it's not because it's America. I'll tell you why it is. It's because, I'll give you an example. When I was in New York before I moved to LA. I remember walking down the street in the early days and it was cold and I had my hat on and someone bumped into me. It was a white man and I don't know, it was accidental. Like people are just, walking, whatever. And he gave me this look. And the look was, he looked at me like, oh, whatever. And I opened my mouth and his whole face changed because he was like, wait, what? The face doesn't connect to the accent. And in that space, that space of confusion was where I understood that I could shock you so I can take up space. And it's not because I am exotic. In 2023, a Black person with an English accent is no longer exotic in the United States. Do you know what I'm saying? But there's enough space for people to just treat you as a human being. In the spaces that I've been able to occupy, people have valued my experience in a way that I have been confused by, actually, because I didn't value my experience. What is it like living in the UK? Oh, well, it's all right. It's cold. What do you do? Like all of a sudden that had cachet, not cachet in the sense of, I'm going to go to this exclusive club, but my perspective on the world meant that I could open up other people's perspectives through my experience.
So it's almost a blessing and I'm not going to say a curse. It was a challenge. It was a challenge to be so many others. But
yes,
the collective of them has allowed you to be who you are now, in the sense where what you've just said, shocking others, to kind of take up the space, to really,
it's a superpower. I say that wholeheartedly. It's not I know what you mean, like it's a blessing, it's a curse, and of course it can be because it feels like it's hard, but I'm very much in the space of, this is my superpower, because people in the UK will have a perspective. People in Ghana will have a perspective. People in the US will have a perspective, and it can be on anything. And I'll go, well, have you considered this? Or I will say, oh yeah, over there they do that, and over here they do that too. And then add to the fact that I spent a year studying at the University of the West Indies in the Caribbean. I have a truly diasporic and not even that global perspective because I love traveling too. So I'm constantly saying, people around the world it sounds cliche, but it really is true. People around the world are far more alike than they like to think or than they know.
I mean, with your role now, because with what you do, you're in so many rooms, which I imagine are very diverse, as we like to say, or maybe not, or maybe not. But in terms of difference, how do you view it now in that setting?
I view it as necessary, and I view it as an opportunity for growth. I always say to people, difference is good, not because of not because it's fashionable, right? But how do you get better? How do you not get better if you don't appreciate how different people are? We're all different. As individuals, we're all different. I'm not in the business of saying, well, and we've all heard this in the UK. Well, we're all the same, aren't we? We're just like me. No, I'm not. I'm very much not that. And I've said that to people. I'm not like you. And they've gone, and they get offended by that. And I go, I'm not. Respectfully, I'm not. But why does it matter if I'm not like you?
I just want to backtrack slightly because it's significant. As I said, you left the UK and you said,
"Oh yeah, it was.
I'm out of here. I'm gone." But in terms of
Be gone.
in terms of that, the lead up and the build up to that, can you talk me through what led to that decision?
I'm happy to. So I had always wanted to work in the media. and I'd graduated from my big university, Warwick University. Shout out to you. And I got a good degree from Warwick. Did all the things that, you're supposed to do in order to open that door, right? And I had applied for all the jobs, and I had done some TV when I was at my A levels, right? And I wanted to try and figure out a way to continue that. And everyone's just like, you're great. And then I didn't hear anything else, right? And then I graduate and I'm still trying to find a way to do that. Even at university, I know I'm going backwards and forwards, forgive me. At university, when they say, what do you want to do? I said, and it took all of my energy, I think I want to be a TV journalist. And I remember my lecturer giving me the look that the teachers give you, like, really? And the other students be like, oh, I didn't know you wanted to do that, because I was too scared to say that, even though I'd done it before, even though I was on the, I had a show on the university radio station, right? I'd never really said that. And I remember that moment being like, okay, bet, cool. Because even in my university career, I actually inhibited myself. I was small. So I graduate. A few years later, a good friend of mine says, I know you're trying and I know it's really, really hard and you haven't found anything. Like, I'd worked for a TV production company for a few months and then I was let go because I was told that I was not a good fit. At that point, I'm looking for another job. I don't know what my next break is going to be. I am desperate to do this because I think if I don't do it now, it's never going to happen. Anyone who's in their early 20s, it's not true. You're going to be absolutely fine. Keep going. And so my friend said, look, there's a job at, she worked in the marketing department of the Daily Telegraph, the promotions department of the Daily Telegraph. And she said, I know it's not quite what you want to do, but maybe you can do this before while you figure it out. I applied for the job and I got it, working in the promotions department of the Daily Telegraph, which I was uneasy with because it's the Daily Telegraph, doesn't really fit my social views, but it was a job. And I was there for a few years and I found myself just increasingly just asking myself, how are you going to keep doing this? Where are you going to go? Like I did a marketing course, did all the things, but that voice was just like, this ain't it. And I was just becoming more and more unhappy. I went online and was looking for internships. I was like, I need to start again. I started looking for internships. And then I was looking for internships in America because someone had taken a sabbatical and I thought, I'm going to take a sabbatical. Now, at the time, my then boyfriend had taken a job in the US and I was just like, this feels like my opportunity. I went on Yahoo, not Google, Yahoo, and did a search, and a university professor from the University of Long Beach called Ralph Engelman emailed me back, and he said, "Look, we don't have any internships, so we don't do any courses." Because, I was also looking for journalism courses too, right? I tried applying at Goldsmiths and all those guys, and I didn't have the time or patience for that in the end. So I was like, let me see if I can just do this thing. I'd always wanted to go to America because different world and all of the stuff that, all the TV that we've grown up with told me America was at the very least fun. Let me just try it. And Professor Engelman emails me back. He says that he has a friend who runs a radio station. Can you imagine my face? I was just like, okay. And he's like, I'm not promising anything, but they are always looking for volunteers. I was like, say less. So then he connects me with his friend, a gentleman called Don Rojas, who had just got a job at a New York radio station called WBAI, which no longer exists, but it's part of the Pacifica network, which is a historically significant radio network, community radio network. So he emailed me back saying, yeah, okay, we have something. I'm like, oh, okay, what am I going to do? And I remember going, but how am I going to pay for this? And here's my sister again. Shout out to Issy. I've told her this, my big sister again, and she's 200 years pregnant. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And she goes, you got to try. What's the worst that could happen? Now, I'm a Virgo, so I was like, well, I don't get the job. And she just went, shut up. What's the worst that could happen? It doesn't work out and you come back. And I went, oh. And I was like, but what if I lose? Imagine me saying this. I'm saying this now and I'm laughing. What if I don't have a job when I come back? The job that I don't like, right? What if I don't hold it that for me? And she just looked at me like I'm looking at myself now, like, you'll be fine. Give it a try. So the next day I went in and I applied for a 3-month sabbatical. It was approved. I found my money, got on a plane. This is the very short version. There was lots of back and forth, especially because this was just after 9/11 as well.
Okay, so we're talking
2001, 2002. And I went. I went for 3 months. And when I got there, Mr. Rojas, who I love and respect, he was like, oh no, I don't think I have anything for you. I said, sir, I have the receipts. Remember this email? He was like, okay. And he found me a space working with this news collective called Free Speech Radio News, FSRN. And I remember opening the door and seeing this young journalist called Deepa Fernandez, who to this day, she's basically family. She's an auntie to my kids. I'm auntie to her kids. And we are family. And she was like, okay. And to give you more context, this was when all of the protests were taking place in the UK about the invasion of Iraq. Do you remember that? Everybody was out in the streets. Nope, don't do it. UK is not going to do it. We were convinced that the UK was not going to join the US. And then all of a sudden, the tide changed and everybody was out in the streets. So my first assignment, because I was in New York, the epicenter of these protests, right, was going out into the streets and gathering sound and interviewing people, and then writing about what was happening in Iraq as well.
Talk about being thrown in the deep end.
Yeah, and the reports were on the hour, every hour. They were like, "Can you write a news script?" I was just like, they were like, "Yeah, of course you can."
You know what? I am hearing patterns because I often when I talk to my guests, I hear patterns, and
Okay.
I wonder if you could, if you'll indulge me at this moment. So I hear another moment of permission. Your sister.
Go on.
Your sister.
Yes.
Who sounds like a boss, by the way. I love her. Never met her.
She's a buddy.
She sounds amazing. Your sister, in that moment where she said, what's the worst that could happen? You come back, your job here that you don't like, etc. Go. That was, it reminds me of how the acting, the dance, the performance teacher spoke. And again, it seemed to ignite something in you to say, okay, I'm going to go, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take up my space. Yes. I'm hearing that like your character's always been there, and the more these layers came of experience, it just emboldened you even more to in the space, growing into the and shaping yourself. And that's what's really I'm picking up a lot of.
I hadn't thought about it like that. It's funny because when I was younger, I was just like, oh, why do people always say that I'm so sensitive? I am sensitive, right? I'm all those things. I claim that as well. But I've always been quite bold. And I feel like that's something that people have misunderstood. And I think it's because in certain moments, I will present as hesitant. But really what it is that I'm just thinking about it. I'm thinking. I have a good friend who says to me, when Chris is quiet, it's because she's doing something. She's doing the big thing. And it's true, because I get to the moment where I go, is this a good thing? But really my spirit, and I really believe in my intuition, and my spirit is very, very strong. Any hesitation that I have is because I'm trying to do the opposite of what my spirit's telling me to do. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But every moment where I've taken that leap, where I've listened to what I'm supposed to do, has been my spirit, and has been a bold move, and has been the right move. Like I remember being in New York and realizing New York was a place where I realized that being a little bit afraid is actually good for you. And New York, it was in New York after I moved to New York was when I realized that I have to trust my gut, because my gut and my instincts and my intuition, because it's also about what I've learned as well, are telling me that I can do that. And I let go of being afraid of what could go wrong, because if something goes wrong, here's the beauty of it. You can figure it out. So you have to let go of what your vision of what you think that thing is going to be. You have to try it. You have to try it. So that was what I learned. And so what I learned about myself was that I'm actually quite adventurous. I've always known that I'm bold. My family will tell you that. You're like, oh, she's got a big mouth. Oh, she just said that. I'm like, yeah, I said it. I said it. Again, even though I would be timid in some spaces, in other places, my family and my friends would be like, she's going to tell you, she's going to call you out on your nonsense, and she's not going to care about it. So I had those two things going on and still do. So I think, and you're right, I think in realizing, in becoming brave, or no, in stepping into my bravery, I should say, because I think I was hiding behind it, because, you know, there's also the other element of knowing that you're not supposed to do something, right? We're Black girls in the UK. There's a lot of things we're not supposed to do. And I kind of shed that not supposed to do stuff, because I get told that all the time. Oh, that's not how we do it. You're not supposed to do that. There's only one way to do it. There's only a right way or wrong way. I had to let that go. And as soon as I did that, I flew.
Do you ever look back to the UK and say, I wish I could have done that there? Or is it, no, I'm happy?
No, I do. So when we met at the Sound Up event, I very much had that moment of, I wish I could have done that here, right? Because sometimes I feel like I had to make the choice of like leaving people that I love, my day ones, yeah, to find a space where I could be myself. And it was not just about work. It's literally just about being able to breathe, right? And when we met at Sound Up, where I was mentoring early career podcasters and showing them how to do the thing, and then, you know, and there were hard moments, and then they'd have a breakthrough, and then there was a moment where they were thanking the team. I got really emotional, because I was like, well, number one, I think people are thanking me for creating a space that did not exist for me back in the day. But also we're still fighting for those spaces. But I'm proud to be part of that fight. But I wish that I was here in the UK to fight that, because then I could be really entrenched with the community that I very, very intimately understand and know that I'm part of. You know what I mean? Because I'm still a bit of an outsider here.
There's so much soil that makes up Christabel. And one of the things that we touched on when we first met, I think I used the term of just blackness or just being black or something. And then we touched on the intersectionalities of that, and the variance in like the diaspora, because there's the West Indian experience, there's the African experience. And then that goes down into the communities, the different African communities, the different West Indian communities. And so often when we identify as black, it can sound so homogenous, but it's not. It's anything but. How has your international life as a Black woman,
international Black woman of mystery,
international Black woman of mystery, how has your international life informed your identity as a Black woman today?
For me, it's like when you're raising kids, I always say, if you're Black, or if you have a partner that's not Black, start with the culture first, because the world's going to tell your child, yeah, what they are and what they aren't. But if they know people talk about, well, if you know where you come from, that's fine. But okay, so knowing where you come from is the flavor of it, is the culture of it, right? Everything else comes on top of that. So if you're Black, yes, you are Black, but you're Ghanaian, or you're Jamaican, or you're African American. And being in America, I understand how that is extra complicated in some ways, right? Because people say, well, we don't know where we're from. And there's this argument about, well, we're American, or, but you have to claim home. And my whole thing is, if there is a tradition, that tradition can be one generation, because we can create traditions anytime. And I'm not trying to say that, I'm not belittling it, because I think it's really something that we have to be respectful of when it comes to our African American brothers and sisters. But whatever that tradition is, that's you. You are Black, but what's your flavor? Like, bring that flavor to it.
I do want to talk about what you've done since being in the States. What doors did that open up for you?
Okay. So after all of that, like I went back and forth after the sabbatical. I was just like, I fell in love. I was just like, this is absolutely what I want to do. The folks at WBAI and FSRN really liked my work, and they were like, okay, well, what can we do? Because obviously you're not trying to work illegally, right? So I worked for FSRN for a bit, and then WBAI asked me to develop an internship, and I worked as an intern with them for a while on their news team, but I actually developed news content for them. And then after that, someone saw me and they said, you should apply for a job for Air America, which is a new news network that was coming up, for a show called to produce a show for a public intellectual called Laura Flanders. So then I got a job with Laura Flanders and worked there for a year. And with Air America, I covered the second Bush, George W. Bush election with Kerry, the Bush-Kerry election, which was wild. So being in New York, imagine being in New York the day after that election that was hotly contested, right? And George W. Bush, his first win was also contested, right? Because you remember all of that. With the Supreme Court vote, New York was deathly quiet. And I was up working. I've been working all through the night. And it was just amazing. So again, I'm like, this is absolutely what I'm meant to do. And I'm covering this election, sitting at a desk, and I'm looking outside, and the offices were downtown. New York is quiet. And then we get the result, and then he wins. New York stays quiet. New York is quiet for that whole week. Like, the whole city was in mourning. It was wild. After Air America, I applied for a job with National Public Radio, now known as NPR, to run a show called News and Notes. That job was on the West Coast. I didn't think I was going to get it. I got off at 2 phone calls later. They offered me the job, and I go, I'm going to LA.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, those are like big events. Those are like some massive moments in history. I imagine if in 20, 30 years time, when they're doing their history lessons, there'll be those recollections of what was going on, and you were right there in the moment, in the thick of it. I suppose what's intriguing me is, how loud was your voice?
It got louder. With Laura Flanders, she has a very loud voice, but what I appreciated with her is that she was fearless, and she was very fearless as well. See, now I'm noticing a pattern. All the people that I've worked with who saw me were also very fearless and demanded me to be fearless as well, because they were like, you got something to say. And she would cajole and she would push me to speak up. I mean, can you believe there was one time, so you're right about all of these big moments. Guantanamo Bay. Yeah, we got an exclusive with Martin Mubanga. And she was just like, call them. And we got him, and we interviewed him live on air. I'm just remembering these things now going, oh my goodness. So that moment with Laura was pivotal, because she forced me to find my voice in some ways. I mean, her voice was much louder, and she definitely, it was her. She wanted her show, but I'm going to change that. It's not that she forced me to. She in pushing her voice forward, right, and me being her producer, I could see what it could be, right? And I think what I realized was that there was a point at which I had to go somewhere else in order to develop that. That's really what happened.
Were you recognizing yourself? Could you see, I'm good. I'm very good at this. I have so much more to contribute to this space and what I can do. Had you felt like I've made it, or was there more further to go?
No. It felt like a complete hustle. I was hustling every day. And again, shout out to my big sister. She was like, I really need you to stop and smell the roses. Do you see what you're doing? And I'd be like, what am I doing? I'm really stressed out. She's like, okay, well, first of all, you need to slow down. But look at what you're doing. Look at what you've done. I want you to slow down. And she said that. I want you to slow down and smell the roses. And I stopped. Yeah, and I stopped. And I was just, no, it's okay. And I stopped. And I was just like, oh, that's not bad. I still have things I want to do.
Are you able to be present in your
Now
job?
I am. Now I am.
How have you developed that skill, that ability? Because the hustle is all about just going.
Yeah.
And there isn't that moment.
Yeah, I was definitely burning out. But you know what stopped that? Parenthood. In 2012 I gave birth to my daughter, and I struggled for a bit, because I remember, again, my sister, she keeps coming up, man. Anyway, I was just like, I'm really scared of becoming a parent. And she said, and I was like, I feel like it's going to change me. I don't know. I feel like it's going to stop everything. And I have things that I want to do. And she said, well, it is going to break you. Sorry. And I was like, ah. And she said, but not in the way that you think. It is going to change you, and you are going to stop. But it's not the end. It's just different. And all those things that you are worried about and that you still want to achieve, you'll still find a way to do it. When I became a mother, I was forced to stop.
Did you have an identity outside of your work before you had to stop? You did?
Yes, I did, but it was really, really closely tied to me being a journalist. It was, looking back, it was really difficult for me to not, because I saw how it opened doors for me, right? More so these days, I call myself less of a journalist. I think once you're a journalist, you're always a journalist, which is why I think it's quite difficult to do. But I don't consider myself a journalist in that sense anymore, because that's not what I do. I don't do that kind of journalism. And it's easier for me to say that now, and actually very freeing.
Is it a release from that?
Because it's also part of that. I'm calling myself a journalist because it opens doors for me. And then I had a shift, and I go, no, you open doors for you. You could call yourself clown, which I do on a regular basis. But if you are doing the thing, it's the thing. It's what you do. It's not the title. That's a very difficult thing to come around to, but it's been liberating to do.
It's what you do. It's not the title.
It's what you do. It is not the title.
That may well be the title of this episode. I'm just letting you know.
Okay.
You are the lead of Spotify's Sound Up Behind the Mic, and you are also the curator, the host, the brain behind the Cipher podcast. So tell me about those two entities in themselves and what it is.
Yeah. Okay. So Sound Up Behind the Mic is a fellowship for early career podcasters. And when I say early career podcasters, it's for people who want to break into podcasting as producers, not as hosts, right? So people who want to work behind the scenes. I developed the fellowship thanks to the great team at Sound Up, led by Natalie Teller. And so I developed this year-long fellowship. And it's the idea is to find ways to make sure that the podcasting space reflects the world that we live in, right? If we're going to create this content that we say should reflect the world that we live in, then you have to have people who behind the scenes who come from that world, right? So that you're not trying to, create something that doesn't make sense. And also everyone's voice is valuable. So I lead that, and it's a 12-month fellowship. And at the end of that, if the people who participate complete the course successfully, they're offered a job. They were offered a fellowship. So that's what Behind the Mic was about. And then after that, again, under the auspices of Sound Up, I developed a mentorship program called Narrative Shift. And that was for independent podcasters who wanted to learn how to write a script and get mentorship from like best in class producers in the US. I had a great time doing those things as well. And then the Cipher is a podcast where I amplify and celebrate people from the global Black experience who are changing and shifting narratives about our cultures around the world. So, you know, I'm not saying if there's a stereotype, they bust it, but it's just more that understanding that we have so many stories to tell, and I'm celebrating the people who are shattering those narratives and shattering the spaces where problematic narratives exist. Just by being, not by being like, okay, we're going to advocate in that way, but just through their work, literally through being. That's what the Cipher's about.
Those two, I mean, it's amazing, obviously, but with what you're doing, you are creating spaces. You are creating spaces that I'm sure people are thinking to themselves, I want to step into this. I want to step into my space. And thankfully, there is space for me to step into. In what you're doing, how much of your past informs your present with regards to your experience and what you went through and what wasn't there for you?
I think a lot of it. I think all of it. I've thought about this a lot. And with the Cipher, really that was born out of wanting to document and wanting people to hear the stories that we often don't get to hear when you turn on the TV or turn on the radio so easily. And I wanted to give people what I didn't have, right? Which is, you know, when I was younger, one of my earliest memories in Scotland is like hearing my parents talking about their day and then like listening to the music and thinking these people are funny and what are they laughing about? Do you know what I mean? And all of that, which like those noises filled my home. And so what I understood is that I was surrounded by storytellers. They're the first storytellers that inspired me, those people having those conversations. And I wanted not necessarily to recreate that, but I wanted people to hear that. I wanted people to hear the people who were inspired to do that, right? That's what the Cipher's about. And then with Behind the Mic, that really was informed by the fact that I'd been in these spaces and editorially led these spaces where I was the only one, or where I was told, well, I don't really understand that story. What do you mean? And I quite frankly was and am sick and tired of people who come into you know, more established media spaces and then are being asked to be small or are being asked to not be who they are. And you know, with the people who went through my program, I'm like, the biggest challenge for you, or I didn't say the biggest challenge, I said, what I need you to do is to be your full self when you step in there. Come in with your ideas, come in with ideas that you think that people may not understand, but you have to be able to back it up editorially. And that's what I've been able to do, because that's what I've established myself in doing. I could pitch anything, you know, and and anyone can pitch anything. I'm not trying to say it's a superpower. I'm just saying that I understand the codes. I'm not asking people to, you know, be to step up and be a safe Black person or a safe person of color. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying be your full self and stand behind that. How do you do that? So both of those things are completely informed by my experience, because they're the two things that I wanted for myself: to be allowed to be myself and to breathe, and be myself in my foolishness, in my seriousness, in my sadness, in my happiness, in all the ways, to have a voice in that way. But also like celebrate the people that I know, like the working class people that I know, again, it's not about the identity politics of it. It's the people who are often shut out from the media space that I'm bringing in. And literally handing them the mic. Like I say at the start of every show, we're passing the mic too. I'm like, I'm just asking you the question, but I'm giving you the mic.
You're giving the permission.
Oh, I see what you did. Yes.
You
I'm
are
giving
now
the permission.
You are now the permission giver. That's all I can hear. Like it has literally come full circle. Those moments that were given to you that allowed you to just take up your space and be as big as you can be have led to you reaching back. You are passing the baton and giving the permission.
Wow. Yeah. That's it. Wow. Yep.
I suppose the question I want to ask you now is, how would you like to see your social corner evolve within the next 5 years? So
next 5 years. You know, I want to see more audio creators specifically leaning into their craft, not being put off by what feels like the ups and downs of everything, especially in the podcasting landscape at the moment, but really taking it as an opportunity to build their communities, build their audiences. You can call it audience, community, whatever, but I want to hear more stories. I want to hear more conversations, more stories. I want to be part of that in the UK and the US. I'm going to say that right now. And in Africa and in the Caribbean. I want to hear more. I do. Yeah. I want us to be telling our stories. That's what I want. And if I can play a part in that, big or small, through the Cipher or just or any other means, I would be happy with that. And then I'll write it in my book, which will come out in 5 years.
Remind us of the title of the book again.
What did I say? I said I lived with giants.
Definitely feel like the giants that you lived with also include yourself. So I'm really rooting for your social corner. 5 years, I'd like to see the same thing. And, I just want to say thank you so much for coming onto the show, because it's been very, very enlightening. And actually, I just feel energized to take up more space. So thank you for speaking to me today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for inviting me and for having me take up all the space, please, and thank you. I will remind myself to do the same as well. It's been a real pleasure. I hope to do this again soon.
Definitely. Thank you very much.